Today, we're diving into all the characters Luffy has asked to join the Straw Hat Pirates, and how different things would be if they actually joined. From fishmen and beautiful women to zombies and centaurs. This is everyone Luffy has asked to join the Straw Hat crew explained. So let's start at the beginning with everyone's favorite, Zoro. Just kidding, Zoro was not the first person Luffy asked to join the crew. It was actually when Luffy was still a kid that he asked both Sabo and Ace to join him. However, Ace and Sabo both declined Luffy's offer because they wanted to captain their own crews, and they also told him they didn't want a crybaby as their captain. Since both of them said no, it was a few years until Luffy set sail that he was actually able to recruit his first member, and that next person he asked was Zoro, who he met on a marine base when Zoro was on the chopping block to be executed. This was in episode 3 that Luffy asked Zoro to join because he knew he was strong right away after their fight against Axe Morgan, and since then, Zoro has been right by Luffy's side everywhere they go. Next up is Usopp, who Luffy met in Syrup Village. They became pretty good friends after Luffy and Zoro helped him save Kaya from Kuro, and it was in episode 17 when Luffy asked Usopp to join his crew. Usopp accepted and they set sail, and they were good for a while, but then Usopp decided to leave the crew in Water 7, and it wasn't until episode 323 that he rejoined the Straw Hat Pirates. The next person Luffy invited to the Straw Hats was Gaimon. If you don't remember Gaimon, he was this little guy stuck in a treasure chest. Luffy thought it was really funny that he looked like that and that he would be a good ally, so he invited him on to join them. Surprisingly, Gaimon actually declined the offer because he had grown a liking to all the animals on the island he was on, and he wanted to stay there and protect them. This was in episode 18, so imagine if Gaimon was on the crew for over 1,000 episodes if he had accepted the offer. Next up is Sanji. Luffy asked Sanji to join the crew when they met at the Baratie. Sanji had served Luffy food, so he already liked him because of that, but then he got to know Sanji's personality. He saw the type of guy he is during their battle against Don Krieg, and that really inspired Luffy to get this guy on his crew. Also the part that he's a really good chef, and Luffy likes food. All this went down in episode 30, and since then, Sanji has been on the crew, except for when he left to go try and get married to Pudding. Of course, he would try and run off with a woman, but he rejoined them later in the Whole Cake Island arc. The next character Luffy asked to join him on his journey was Nami. He actually asked her all the way back in episode 6, and she didn't really accept or decline the offer. She doesn't officially join them until episode 44 after Arlong Park and all of that went down. Nami had initially betrayed Luffy to try and save her home village, and then Arlong betrayed his promise to Nami, so Luffy had to come in and save the day. And honestly, Luffy's very lucky because without Nami, him and Zoro would have been lost on the sea forever. One character I forgot about is Zeph. Luffy actually wanted Zeph to join the crew as well whenever he recruited Sanji in episode 30, but Zeph, of course, declined. He had been retired for a while, and he really likes running the Baratie restaurant. Zeph would have made a great advisor to the Straw Hats at the beginning, but in the end, he stayed right where he was. Next up is a character you probably don't even remember. You may have never even seen this character before because it's a filler character. This is Apis, a person Luffy met in the Warship Island filler arc, where the Straw Hats discover dragons are still alive, and they end up saving them. After that, Luffy invites Apis to join them, which is pretty interesting because Apis is a little kid, and normally Luffy does not do that. This all went down in episode 61, and in the end, Apis decided to say no because she wanted to stay and protect the dragon's nest. Crocus, the man Luffy meets inside of Laboon. They immediately learned that Crocus was a doctor taking care of Laboon, and Luffy wanted him to join because at the time, the crew did not have a doctor yet. It would have been kind of cool if Crocus did join, and then they found out later on that Crocus was the doctor for Gold D. Roger, but Crocus stayed behind because he had to take care of Laboon, who had been ramming his head into the Grand Line for many years. Luffy asked Crocus to join in episode 63. Another doctor Luffy asked to join, not Chopper, but Dr. Kureha. Now, he doesn't really directly ask Kureha to join, but once he learns that she had taken care of Nami and also patched him and Sanji up, Luffy was very interested in having her join because once again, they were still doctorless. The crew really needed a doctor. So Kureha doesn't end up joining. She probably would have said no anyway if Luffy did ask her straight up, and this happened around episode 88 in the Drum Kingdom arc. The doctor troubles continued until this person, Tony Chopper. Luffy really needed a doctor on the crew, especially after the scare of the 5-day sickness Nami had. She only had a couple days left to live, and they just luckily found a doctor on Drum Kingdom. After lot of convincing, the Straw Hats are able to get Chopper to join them on their journey, and Chopper accepts the offer because he really wanted friendships and wants to fulfill his dream of solving every disease in the world. In episode 90, Chopper joins the crew. The Kung Fu Dugongs. Luffy encounters these guys in episode 96 of the anime, and these Dugongs initially challenge the Straw Hats to some martial arts. Luffy accepts this challenge and defeats them, but in the Kung Fu Dugong culture, whoever beats them is now their boss, so they are loyal to Luffy. They see Luffy as their master, and they all want to follow him, but instead of asking them to join, Luffy says they need to stay behind and get stronger before they can join. Vivi is very openly given an invitation to join the Straw Hats, especially after their battle against Crocodile. They had journeyed together since the start of the Grand Line. They met at Laboon, were together in Whiskey Peak, Little Garden, and then all of what happened in Alabasta. And if she did join, she would have joined alongside her companion Karoo, the duck. However, surprisingly, Vivi doesn't join. She chooses to stay behind and protect her country, who was in a very bad spot at the time. If you don't remember, there was the whole Civil War thing, so it's understandable Vivi had to stay behind. She is the princess of the country. So in episode 129, she declines the offer to join the Straw Hats, but it's very possible she could still end up joining with how things are shaking up in the current story. The next person, who was also in the Alabasta arc, was Nico Robin. She had been around the Straw Hats, but as Miss All Sunday, that was the name they knew her by. And then after Crocodile's defeat, Robin wanted to die. She had nowhere to go, but then Luffy saved her life, and Robin told Luffy, "Since you saved my life, you're now responsible for me." Luffy didn't even hesitate to accept Robin to the crew, even though the rest of the Straw Hats initially didn't agree. So in episode 130, Nico Robin joined the Straw Hats. Next was the Water 7 arc, and I thought this guy Paulie was gonna join, but Luffy never asked him to join. Instead, he ended up asking this other talented shipwright named Frankie. The Straw Hats desperately needed a shipwright. Usopp would just be throwing random boards and nailing them down onto the Going Merry, and also Frankie was one of the people who built them the 1000 Sunny, so Luffy was very thankful for that. And while Frankie didn't really want to join at first, he was coaxed into it by his friends and family, and with a little help from Robin. And in episode 322, the Straw Hats got their shipwright. Another shipwright Luffy tried to get was Iceberg. Once again, he doesn't straight up ask him to join, but he very much hints at it. Luffy saw that Iceberg is a very talented shipwright and admired him for that. But Iceberg said he had too many responsibilities in Water 7 and he had to stay behind since he is the mayor of the town after all, so he politely shut down any chances of him joining and becoming the shipwright. In Enies lobby, we meet another pretty cool character by the name Sogeking. Luffy thinks Sogeking is so cool because he's the king of all snipers. And of course, Luffy had to ask him to join the crew, especially after he helped rescue Robin in Enies lobby. A lot of people thought Sogeking would end up joining, but he says he has to go save the world and snipe other people and declines the offer, unfortunately. But Usopp rejoined just a few episodes later, so good thing Sogeking didn't join, otherwise there would have been 2 snipers on the crew. In Thriller Bark, Luffy asked a zombie unicorn and a zombie tree to join the crew. On the way to Gecko Moria's mansion, they meet these zombie-like creatures, and Luffy thinks their unusual appearance is hilarious. So of course, he had to ask them if they would join. Also in Thriller Bark, we meet Brook, the skeleton. Like several other characters we've met so far, Luffy thought Brook's skeleton appearance was the coolest thing ever. So he asked him to join right away in episode 337. Literally the first episode Brook appears in. Brook says yes at first, but then he kind of retracts his statement because his shadow was stolen by Gecko Moria, so he actually couldn't travel with the crew. But then eventually, after he gets his shadow back, he decides to join, and officially episode 381, Brook joins the Straw Hats. Skipping through Impel Down and Marineford, we get past the time skip all the way to Dressrosa. This is the next time Luffy even hints at someone joining the crew, and it's actually not someone, it was an animal. A bull, matter of fact. This bull named Uzi helped Luffy throughout the Colosseum battles in Dressrosa, and Uzi even carries Luffy up Pika's body at one point. Like I said, Uzi is just an animal, and because of that, I don't think Luffy's explicitly asked Uzi to join, but Uzi helped Luffy out a lot during Dressrosa, so in my book, Uzi is an honorary Straw Hat member. Kiyu Taurus the Centaur is another person Luffy thought looked awesome, so he wanted him to join. They met each other on Punk Hazard, and Luffy tried to become friends like he does with everybody, but then Kiyu Taurus realized Luffy was an enemy and attacked him. Once again, Luffy doesn't straight up ask him to join, but Kiyu Taurus looked so interesting, Luffy was thinking about it. Apparently, all you have to do is look cool, and you might have a good chance of joining the Straw Hat Pirates. If I was in One Piece, that would be my goal. Another character or thing, I guess, Luffy asked to join the crew in Punk Hazard was Kinemon's legs. In episode 582, Luffy finds half of Kinemon's body, his legs. After messing with them and kind of running around them, laughing at them, Luffy thought it would be a great idea to ask these two legs if they wanted to join the Straw Hats. Of course, this was a dumb idea, and Robin, Zoro, and Usopp, who were with Luffy at the time, shut it down immediately. So unfortunately, Kinemon's legs never ended up joining. Jinbe the Fishman. I think we all knew Jinbe was a possibility of joining after Marineford whenever he saved Luffy, and then even after the battle when he helped Luffy realized he still had all of his friends. And then when Jinbe appeared back in Fishman Island, a lot of people thought that would be the time. It's the perfect opportunity for Jinbe to join. But then he says, no, I actually have other obligations. In episode 568, Luffy does ask Jinbe to join them, and he declines, because he was technically under the Big Mom Pirates' jurisdiction. Jinbe had agreed to join the Big Mom Pirates as long as they protected Fishman Island, so he could not join Luffy's crew until he met with Big Mom and severed their ties. So we go through several arcs, and over 400 episodes later, after Whole Cake Island and towards the beginning of the Wano arc, Jinbe officially joins the Straw Hats in episode 980. It was a long time coming, but now he's officially kind of the advisor and helmsman of the Straw Hat Pirates. So many people thought Yamato would be joining the crew after helping them defeat Kaido, and I think even Luffy thought Yamato was 100% gonna be his crewmate soon. However, everyone was wrong. That was not the plans Oda had for Yamato. Yamato ends up choosing to stay behind in Wano, which really, in my eyes, didn't make a lot of sense. But Yamato wanted to be like Odin, right? And since Kaido was now defeated, nobody was protecting the land of Wano, and if it was Odin, Odin would want to stay and protect them. So that's what Yamato chose to do. Yamato stayed behind in Wano to protect them because they were weak. With Kaido there, nobody was going to attack the land of Wano. But now without Kaido, there may have been other pirates interested in swooping in and taking control of the country, so Yamato didn't want that. Luffy ends up accepting Yamato's decision to stay behind, and they still formed a very good bond with each other over the Wano arc. Those are all the people Luffy has asked to join the Straw Hat Pirates. Who's going to be next? Is it someone in Elbaf? We'll see.